"You don't belong here," the man in the tailored navy suit said, his voice just loud enough to draw a few smirks from the waiting line. "And people like you never will." Ethan Cole didn't respond, not right away. He stood there beside his rusted pickup, grease still faintly marking his knuckles, his 8-year-old daughter Lily clutching his sleeve as if she could feel the weight of every word being thrown at him. "I just asked a fair price," Ethan said quietly, his tone steady, almost gentle, like he was speaking to someone who didn't yet understand something important. The man laughed once, sharp and dismissive. "Fair? You call that fair? You fix engines, not deals. Stay in your lane." A few people nearby chuckled. Someone whispered. Someone else shook their head. The late evening air carried the smell of rain coming, thick and restless, like the sky itself was holding its breath. Ethan glanced down at Lily. She didn't say anything, but her small hand tightened around his. "That was enough. We're done here," he said softly, turning away, dignity intact, even if no one around him noticed it. But someone did. Across the street, beneath the flickering light of a bus stop sign, a woman stood still, watching. She hadn't moved during the exchange, not when the laughter rose, not when the man walked off like he had won something. Her coat was damp at the edges, her hair slightly out of place, like she had been walking for miles with nowhere to go. And yet, there was something in the way she stood, something composed, something controlled, like she belonged in rooms far more powerful than this one. The first drop of rain hit the pavement. Then another. Within seconds, the sky opened. People scattered. Doors slammed. Engines roared to life. Ethan hurried Lily into the truck, but before he could close his own door, he saw her again. The woman was crossing the street now, moving through the rain without hesitation. Her eyes locked on him with a kind of quiet urgency. "Please," she said when she reached him, her voice calm but edged with something deeper. "I just need a place to stay for the night." Ethan hesitated just for a moment, not because of suspicion but because life had taught him that nothing was ever as simple as it sounded. Lily peeked out from inside the truck, her wide eyes studying the stranger. The rain intensified, soaking through fabric, blurring the edges of everything. The woman didn't flinch. She didn't beg. She simply stood there waiting, as if she had already decided that this man, out of everyone else in the world, was the one she could trust. Ethan exhaled slowly, then stepped aside. "It's not much," he said, his voice quiet, steady, unchanged by everything that had just happened. "But it's warm." And somewhere in the distance, unseen and unheard, a black SUV turned onto the main road, headlights cutting through the storm, searching for someone the world could not afford to lose. If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell. It really helps the channel and means a lot to us. Now let's go on. The drive home was quiet but not uncomfortable, the kind of quiet that settled in naturally when people did not feel the need to fill every second with noise. The rain tapping steadily against the windshield as Ethan guided the old pickup down the narrow road leading out of town, while Lily kept glancing back at the woman in the passenger seat as if trying to solve a puzzle that had just walked into their lives. "Do you have a name?" Lily finally asked, her voice small but curious. The woman, hesitating just a fraction before answering, "Scarlett," she said softly, like the name carried weight she did not want to reveal too quickly. Ethan nodded once, eyes still on the road. "I am Ethan and that is Lily," he said, simple, direct, no questions asked, no pressure given, the heater in the truck rattling as it pushed out uneven warmth while the scent of motor oil and old leather filled the cab. Scarlett glanced at Ethan's hands on the steering wheel, noticing the roughness, the quiet strength in the way he held control without force. "You did not ask why I needed help," she said after a moment. Ethan shrugged slightly. "People usually have their reasons," he replied, "and most of them are not something they want to explain in the rain." Lily smiled faintly at that, like she had heard this kind of answer before, like her father had lived by it for years. The truck turned onto a gravel driveway, tires crunching softly as a small, weathered house came into view, its porch light flickering gently against the storm. Nothing impressive, nothing polished, but warm in a way that could not be bought. Ethan parked and stepped out first, jogging around to open the door for Lily before glancing back at Scarlett. "Watch your step," he said, the ground already slick with mud. She stepped out carefully, her shoes not made for places like this, but she did not complain, did not hesitate, just followed inside. The house was modest, a worn couch, a small kitchen, a few framed drawings on the wall clearly done by a child's hand. Lily kicked off her shoes and ran to grab a towel, returning quickly to hand it to Scarlett without being asked. "You can use this," she said, her voice brighter now. Scarlett took it, her fingers lingering for a second as if she was not used to receiving something so freely. "Thank you," she replied, and she meant it in a way that felt deeper than the moment required. Ethan moved toward the kitchen, setting a kettle on the stove. "It is not much," he said again, almost like a quiet apology, "but you can take the couch and we have some dry clothes you can borrow." Scarlett looked around slowly, taking in every detail, the simplicity, the warmth, the absence of pretense, her eyes pausing on a photograph of Ethan and Lily, both smiling. In a way that felt real, unguarded, something rare. "It is more than enough," she said, her voice softer now, almost thoughtful. The rain continued outside, steady, relentless, but inside something shifted, something quiet and unseen, like a life that had been running too fast had finally been forced to stop. And for the first time in a long time, Scarlett Hayes did not feel like she was being watched, judged, or needed by the world beyond those walls, but somewhere miles away, inside the back seat of a moving black SUV, a man checked his phone again, his expression tightening as another call went unanswered. "We are running out of time," he muttered, and the vehicle accelerated into the storm. The kettle whistled softly, cutting through the quiet like a gentle reminder that life, no matter how complicated, still moved forward in small, ordinary ways. Ethan poured the hot water into 3 mismatched mugs, the faint scent of chamomile rising into the air as Lily climbed onto her usual chair, swinging her feet just slightly above the worn wooden floor. Scarlett sat across from them now, wrapped in one of Ethan's old flannel shirts, the sleeves rolled carefully at her wrists, the fabric too large for her frame but somehow grounding. "You live here all the time?" she asked, her voice measured, not judgmental, just curious. Ethan nodded once, setting the mugs down. "About 10 years now," he replied. "Long enough to fix everything twice and still have things that need fixing." Lily smiled at that, like it was a line she had heard before, like it belonged to him. Scarlett took a small sip, her eyes lowering slightly as if the warmth caught her off guard. "It is quiet," she said. Almost to herself, Ethan leaned back in his chair, the wood creaking beneath him. "Quiet is not a bad thing," he said. "You can hear what matters when everything else slows down." For a moment no one spoke. The rain softened outside, shifting from heavy drops to a steady whisper against the roof. Scarlett's gaze drifted again to the walls, to the drawings, to the small details that told a story without needing words. "You built this life," she said, her tone softer now. Ethan shrugged lightly. "I kept what I could," he answered, "and I let go of the rest." Lily reached for his hand without looking, her fingers finding his instinctively. Scarlett noticed that, the ease of it, the unspoken connection, something in her expression shifted, almost imperceptibly, like a thought she had not allowed herself to have in a long time. "Where is Lily's mother?" she asked carefully. Ethan did not look away, did not tense. He simply answered. "She passed away when Lily was 3. His voice steady. Not cold, not broken, just honest. Lily's hand tightened slightly, but she did not pull away. Scarlett lowered her gaze. "I am sorry," she said quietly. Ethan nodded once. "We are still here," he replied, and there was something in that sentence that carried more strength than any explanation could. The clock on the wall ticked softly, marking time in a way that felt slower than the world outside. Scarlett glanced toward the window, the storm beginning to fade, but her expression did not follow it. There was something unsettled beneath her calm, something unresolved. Her hand moved toward her coat, where a phone rested unseen, silent, untouched. "You should call someone," Ethan said. Gently, not accusing, not prying, just offering. Scarlett paused, her fingers still. "Not tonight," she answered after a moment, her voice quieter now, almost certain. Ethan studied her for a brief second, then nodded, accepting that answer without question, because that was who he was, someone who did not need the full story to choose kindness. Lily yawned softly, leaning against his arm, the long day finally catching up to her. Ethan stood, lifting her carefully. "Time for bed," he said. Carrying her down the short hallway, Scarlett watched them disappear for a moment, the simple rhythm of their life unfolding in front of her without effort, without performance, and something inside her, something that had been buried beneath years of control and expectation, began to loosen, just slightly, but far away, under the dim glow of highway lights. The black SUV slowed as it approached a gas station, a second vehicle pulling in behind it, doors opening quickly, voices low but urgent. "We tracked her last signal to this area," one man said, scanning the darkness. "She cannot stay hidden much longer." And for the first time that night, the storm was no longer the only thing closing in. The house grew quieter as the night settled in, the kind of silence that did not feel empty but full, like it was holding something gentle between its walls. Ethan returned from Lily's room a few minutes later, closing the door halfway behind him as if even the air should move softer while she slept. Scarlett remained at the table, her hands wrapped loosely around the now lukewarm mug, her eyes distant but not cold. "She falls asleep fast," she said, her voice almost thoughtful. Ethan nodded, leaning lightly against the doorway. "Kids trust the day to end," he replied. "They do not carry it the way adults do." Scarlett let out a quiet breath, something between a soft laugh and a sigh. "That must be nice," she said. Ethan walked back into the room, gathering the empty mugs without ceremony. "It is not something you keep," he answered, rinsing them under the sink. "It is something you learn to return to if you can." Scarlett watched him for a moment. The simplicity of his movements, the absence of urgency, and for a brief second she looked like someone who had forgotten how to slow down. "You make it sound easy," she said. Ethan shook his head slightly, turning off the faucet. "It is not easy," he replied. "It is just honest." The words hung in the air longer than expected, not heavy, just true. Scarlett looked down at her hands, then back up. "Do you ever wish for something more?" she asked, the question coming out quieter than she intended. Ethan paused, considering it, not defensively, not quickly, just with the kind of patience that came from living with fewer illusions. "More what?" he asked gently. Scarlett hesitated, searching for a word that did not sound like everything she had spent years chasing. "More than this," she said finally. Ethan leaned against the counter, folding his arms loosely. "I used to," he admitted. "I used to think more meant bigger, faster, louder, like if I kept pushing, something would finally feel right." He glanced briefly toward the hallway where Lily slept, then back at Scarlett. "But somewhere along the way, I realized more is not always better," he said. "Sometimes more just makes it harder to see what you already have." Scarlett did not respond right away, her eyes softening just slightly, like something inside her was shifting in a way she did not fully understand. Her phone remained silent in her coat, but the weight of it seemed heavier now, like a reminder of a world she had stepped away from but had not escaped. "I have spent years building something," she said slowly, her voice more distant now. "Something people depend on, something that never stops moving." Ethan nodded, not interrupting, not analyzing, just listening. "And if I disappear for even a moment," she continued, "everything starts to unravel." Ethan tilted his head slightly. "Then maybe it was never meant to depend on just one person," he said calmly. Scarlett looked at him, really looked this time, like she was seeing something she had not allowed herself to consider before. The idea that control was not the same as strength, that holding everything together might also be what was breaking her. Outside, the rain had almost stopped, the last drops tapping softly against the windows, the storm passing without announcement, and yet something deeper lingered, something unspoken. "You should get some rest," Ethan said after a moment, his tone unchanged, steady, respectful. Scarlett nodded slowly, standing from the table, the oversized flannel shifting slightly around her, grounding her in a way that felt unfamiliar but right. She walked toward the couch, pausing briefly as if she wanted to say something more. But instead she simply turned and said, "Thank you, Ethan," and this time it carried more than gratitude. It carried a quiet acknowledgement of something she could not yet name. Ethan gave a small nod in return, turning off the main light, leaving only the soft glow of a lamp near the couch, and as Scarlett lay down, staring at the ceiling, listening to the unfamiliar rhythm of a quiet home, she realized something that unsettled her more than anything else that night. For the first time in years, she was not thinking about what came next, but miles away, under the dim lights of a roadside station, a man stared at a tablet screen as a signal blinked weakly on the map. "She is closer than we thought," he said quietly, and the vehicles around him began to move again, not fast, not loud, but with a purpose that did not need to be announced. Morning did not arrive with noise, it arrived quietly, like the house itself had decided not to disturb what little peace had settled overnight. The soft light of early dawn slipping through the thin curtains, casting pale gold across the worn wooden floor, while the faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant call of a passing truck reminded the world that time had not stopped, even if it had slowed. Scarlett woke before anyone else, her eyes opening slowly as if she had forgotten where she was for just a second. The unfamiliar ceiling, the scent of coffee beginning to brew somewhere nearby, the absence of notifications, of urgency, of expectation. all of it pressed gently against her senses like something both foreign and dangerously comforting. She sat up slowly, the oversized flannel still wrapped around her, her feet touching the cool floor as she stood. Moving carefully through the quiet house in the kitchen, Ethan was already there, standing by the stove, flipping pancakes with the same calm rhythm he seemed to bring to everything. "You are up early," he said without turning, his voice steady, not surprised. Scarlett paused for a moment before stepping closer. "I am usually up earlier," she replied, then added after a beat, "just not like this." Ethan glanced over his shoulder briefly, offering a small nod before placing another pancake onto the plate. Lily's laughter suddenly echoed from the hallway, soft but bright, breaking through the stillness like something pure. "Daddy, you burned the first one again," she said as she appeared, her hair slightly messy, her smile immediate. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "That is called testing the pan," he replied, setting the plate down as she climbed into her chair. Scarlett watched the exchange, something in her expression softening again, like she was witnessing a version of life that had never asked anything from her. "Do you want coffee?" Ethan asked, already reaching for a mug. Scarlett nodded. "Yes, thank you," she said, her voice quieter now, more grounded. The three of them sat at the small table, the morning unfolding in simple pieces, syrup drizzling, forks clinking, Lily talking about school like it was the most important thing in the world. And for her it was. Scarlett listened more than she spoke, her attention not divided, not pulled elsewhere, just present, something she had not allowed herself to be in years. But then, without warning, a faint vibration broke the moment, subtle, almost hidden. Scarlett froze just slightly, her eyes shifting toward her coat draped over the chair, the phone inside lighting up again, persistent, silent, demanding. Ethan noticed the movement but said nothing. He simply took a sip of his coffee, giving her space to choose. Lily tilted her head, curious. "Are you not going to answer that?" she asked innocently. Scarlett hesitated, her fingers tightening slightly around the edge of the table. "Not right now," she replied softly, but the calm in her voice carried a hint of tension that had not been there before. Outside, the gravel driveway crunched faintly under the weight of something heavy passing nearby, not stopping, just moving, but close enough to be noticed. Ethan's gaze shifted briefly toward the window, then back to Scarlett, not questioning, just aware. The world she had stepped away from was no longer distant. It was approaching quietly, steadily, like a tide that did not need to rush to reach the shore. Scarlett finally stood, walking to her coat, her hand hovering over the phone as it vibrated again. This time longer, more insistent. She closed her eyes for a brief second before picking it up, the screen filled with missed calls, messages, alerts, a life waiting to reclaim her. She exhaled slowly, then pressed the screen dark again without answering, turning back toward the table, toward the small, ordinary moment she was not ready to leave. But in the distance, beyond the trees, a black SUV slowed as it passed the narrow road, its tinted windows reflecting the morning light. And this time, it did not keep going. The moment did not break all at once. It shifted slowly, like a quiet room beginning to feel smaller without anyone moving. Scarlett returned to the table with the phone now still in her hand, her fingers resting against it as if it carried more weight than before. Ethan watched her without staring, his expression unchanged, but there was a subtle awareness in the way he leaned back slightly, giving her space without stepping away. "You do not have to stay," he said calmly, not as a dismissal, not as pressure, just as truth. Scarlett looked at him, her eyes steady but layered with something more complicated now. "I know," she replied, her voice soft, "but I am not ready to go back yet." Lily glanced between them, sensing something she could not name but feeling it anyway. "Back to where?" she asked, tilting her head slightly. Scarlett hesitated, then offered a small smile that did not quite reach her eyes. "Somewhere very busy," she said, choosing the simplest version of a much larger truth. Lily accepted that answer easily, returning to her pancakes as if the world could always be explained in simple ways. Ethan stood and began clearing the table, the routine, grounding, steady, unchanged even as something unseen pressed closer. "Busy does not always mean important," he said quietly, placing a plate into the sink. Scarlett let out a faint breath, almost a laugh, but there was no humor in it. "In my world it does," she said, then added after a pause, "or at least it is supposed to." Ethan nodded once, not arguing, just acknowledging, because he understood something she was still holding on to, that sometimes people build lives they cannot step away from without feeling like everything will collapse. The phone in her hand lit up again, this time with a name flashing across the screen, bold, persistent, undeniable. Scarlett's expression changed, just slightly, a flicker of tension crossing her face before she turned away and stepped toward the window. "You should take that," Ethan said gently, not looking at her directly now, giving her the privacy she had not asked for but clearly needed. Scarlett stood there for a moment, staring at the screen as it continued to ring, then finally slowly she answered. "What?" she said, her tone low, controlled, but the silence on the other end stretched just long enough to shift the air around her. "I said I needed time," she continued, her voice still calm but firmer now. "No, I am not in danger." A pause, her eyes narrowing slightly. "I know what is at stake." Another pause, longer this time, her gaze drifting toward the small kitchen, toward Ethan and Lily, toward something she had not expected to find. "Then handle it," she said quietly. "Just for once, handle it without me." The line went silent, and for a moment so did she, lowering the phone slowly as if the weight of that decision had finally settled in. Ethan did not ask what the call was about. He simply handed Lily her backpack, kneeling slightly to adjust the strap on her shoulder. "Ready?" he asked. Lily nodded, then looked at Scarlett. "Are you going to be here when I get back?" she asked, her voice hopeful in a way that made the question feel bigger than it should have been. Scarlett hesitated just for a second, then nodded. "Yes," she said softly, and this time she meant it without hesitation. Ethan stood, glancing toward Scarlett briefly, something unspoken passing between them. Not curiosity, not judgment, just recognition, like he understood that whatever world she came from was already knocking at the door. But he also knew she was not leaving yet. Outside, the black SUV remained parked just beyond the curve of the road, engine idling low, almost silent, two figures inside watching, waiting, not rushing, because they knew something she was only just beginning to realize, that no matter how far she stepped away, her world would always find her. But for now, inside that small house, time still moved differently, slower, quieter, like it was giving her one last chance to decide who she wanted to be. The door closed softly behind Ethan and Lily, the sound lingering just long enough to leave the house feeling different, not empty, but quieter in a way that made every small detail stand out. The ticking clock, the faint creak of wood settling, the distant hum of a truck passing somewhere beyond the trees. Scarlett stood alone in the kitchen for a moment, her hand still resting lightly on the edge of the table as if she had not fully decided what to do next. Then she exhaled slowly and moved toward the window, pulling the curtain aside just enough to look out. The road stretched quietly ahead, damp from the night before, sunlight beginning to break through the thinning clouds. And then she saw it, not close, not obvious, but there, a black SUV parked just beyond the curve, still, deliberate, waiting. Her expression did not panic, it tightened, controlled, like someone who had expected this moment but hoped it would come later. She let the curtain fall back into place, turning away. Without rushing, without reacting outwardly, because that was who she had learned to be, someone who did not show the storm even when it had already arrived. The phone in her hand vibrated again. She looked down at it, the same name, the same insistence. This time she answered without hesitation. "I told you not to follow me," she said quietly, her voice calm but edged with authority that no longer needed to be hidden. A pause, then her eyes shifted slightly toward the door, toward the world she had stepped into. "No, you listen to me," she continued, her tone sharpening just enough to reveal something beneath the surface. "I am not coming back today." Another pause, longer now, her jaw tightening just slightly. "Then delay it," she said. "Or find someone else who can make the decision." Silence followed, heavy, then she closed her eyes briefly, as if absorbing whatever was being said on the other end. When she spoke again, her voice softened, but not with weakness, with certainty. "For once, let it not be me." She ended the call without waiting for a response, lowering the phone slowly as the room settled around her again. But the stillness felt different now, thinner, like it could break at any moment. She walked toward the sink, running water briefly over her hands as if grounding herself in something real, something simple. But even that could not fully quiet what was moving inside her. The weight of responsibility, the years of control, the expectation that she was the one who held everything together. She turned off the faucet and stood there for a moment, then moved to the small living room, her eyes scanning the space again. The couch where she had slept, the drawings on the wall, the photograph she had noticed the night before. She stepped closer to it, lifting it gently, studying the way Ethan and Lily smiled, not for the camera, not for anyone else, just because they were there together. Something in her expression softened again, but this time it carried a quiet conflict because she knew what this place represented. Not just comfort but a choice, one that did not fit into the life she had built. Outside, the SUV door opened, a man stepped out. adjusting his jacket as he looked toward the house, not rushing, not aggressive, just certain. Another vehicle pulled up behind it, slower, deliberate. The world she had left was no longer waiting at a distance. It was here, measured in feet now, not miles. Scarlett set the photograph back in its place, her fingers lingering for a second before she stepped back, her posture straightening almost instinctively, the softness in her expression folding back into control, into composure, into the version of herself that had led rooms, closed deals, carried expectations no one else could hold. But as she turned toward the door, ready to face whatever had come for her, there was still something different in her eyes, something quieter, something that had not been there before, and for the first time, she was not sure which version of herself would walk out to meet them. The knock did not come loudly, it came once, firm and precise, the kind of knock that did not ask for permission but did not need to. Scarlett stood still for a fraction of a second, her hand resting lightly against the edge of the door as if she could feel the weight of everything waiting on the other side. Then she opened it, not slowly, not hesitantly, but with the same controlled composure she had worn in rooms filled with power. The man standing there gave a small nod the moment he saw her. His posture straight, his expression respectful but tense. "Miss Hayes," he said, his voice low, measured. "We have been looking for you." Scarlett did not step back, she did not invite him in, she simply met his gaze. "I told you I needed time," she replied, calm, unwavering. Behind him, two black SUVs idled quietly, their engines barely audible. A second man stepped out, holding a tablet, his eyes scanning briefly before settling, not on her, but past her, toward the house, toward something simpler than the world they belonged to. "The board meeting has been moved twice," the first man continued. "The investors are asking questions and the press has already started speculating." Scarlett's expression did not change, but something in her eyes sharpened. "And yet the company still exists," she said evenly. "Which means someone is capable of keeping it standing without me for more than 12 hours. The man hesitated, just slightly, as if the answer he had prepared no longer fit the moment. "It is not just about operations," he said, lowering his voice further. "It is about perception, about leadership, about you." Scarlett let that sit in the air for a second, then stepped outside, closing the door gently behind her, separating the two worlds with a single quiet motion. The morning light caught her differently now, no longer softened by the house behind her, but sharpened, defined, revealing the authority she had not needed to show before. "You think leadership means being present every second," she said, her tone calm but deliberate. "But if everything collapses the moment I step away, then we have built something fragile, not something strong." The second man shifted slightly, glancing at the tablet, then back at her. "The shareholders will not see it that way," he said carefully. Scarlett allowed herself a small breath, not frustration, not impatience, just clarity. "Then they will learn," she replied, the words quiet but final. A brief silence followed, the kind that settles when no one is sure how to push further. The first man straightened slightly, adjusting his stance. "We can arrange a private jet within the hour," he said. "No media, no disruptions, you can be back before the market closes." Scarlett looked past him, down the road, toward nothing in particular, as if measuring distance in something other than miles. "No," she said simply. Both men paused, not expecting that answer, not because it was loud, but because it was absolute. "Not today," she added, her gaze returning to them, steady, unshaken. The second man lowered the tablet slowly. "Then when?" he asked, more quietly now. Scarlett did not answer right away, her eyes flicking briefly toward the house behind her, toward the life inside it that had not demanded anything from her, that had not required her to be more than present. "I will let you know," she said finally, turning slightly as if the conversation had already ended. But before she stepped away she added, softer this time, "And until then, do your jobs." The men exchanged a glance, not defiant, not confused, just adjusting to a version of her they had not seen before. Then the first man nodded once. "Understood," he said, stepping back toward the SUV. The engines remained running, but something in the air had shifted, not tension, not conflict, something quieter, like the moment before a decision fully takes shape. Scarlett stood there for a second longer, then turned back toward the door, reaching for the handle, and as she stepped inside, leaving the vehicles, the expectations, the entire weight of her world waiting outside, the silence that followed was not empty, it was chosen. The house felt different when Scarlett stepped back inside, not because anything had changed, but because she had. The quiet no longer felt like something she had borrowed for a night, It felt like something she had chosen, even if only for now. She closed the door gently behind her, the faint sound of the SUVs outside fading into the background as if they belonged to another world. She stood there for a moment, her hand still on the handle, her posture no longer rigid, just still, as if she was allowing herself to feel the weight of the decision she had just made. Not dramatic, not loud, but real. She walked slowly back into the kitchen, the sunlight now fully stretching across the table, illuminating the small imperfections in the wood, the half-empty coffee mug Ethan had left behind, the quiet evidence of a life lived without performance. She reached for the mug, holding it for a second before setting it down again, not out of hesitation, but out of respect for something she did not want to disturb. Time passed differently here, not measured by meetings or markets, but by moments that did not ask to be noticed, only experienced outside. The vehicles remained for a while, engines idling, then one by one they pulled away, not in defeat, not in urgency, but in understanding, because even they knew there were decisions that could not be forced, only made. The sound faded until it was gone completely, leaving behind a silence that felt deeper than before. Scarlett moved toward the living room, her eyes drifting once more to the photograph. This time she did not pick it up, she simply looked at it, and for the first time she did not see something she was missing. She saw something she could choose. Hours later, the sound of tires on gravel returned, familiar, steady. Ethan's truck pulling into the driveway as the front door opened. Lily's voice filled the house before she even stepped inside. "We are back," she called out, her energy bright and immediate. Scarlett turned toward the sound, her expression softer now, more grounded. Ethan stepped in behind Lily, his eyes meeting Scarlett's for a brief moment, not asking, not assuming, just observing, like he was giving her the space to say what she needed to say. Lily dropped her backpack and ran toward her, stopping just short as if remembering something important. "You stayed," she said, her voice filled with quiet excitement. Scarlett nodded, a small genuine smile forming. "I said I would," she replied, and there was something different in the way she said it, something that carried more than just the moment. Ethan set the keys down on the counter, glancing toward the window, noticing the empty road, then back at Scarlett. "They found you," he said calmly, not as a question, just as fact. Scarlett nodded once, meeting his gaze without hesitation. "Yes," she said, then added after a brief pause, "and I told them to wait." Ethan studied her for a second, then gave a small nod, not impressed, not surprised, just acknowledging the weight of that choice. "That is not something most people can do," he said quietly. Scarlett let out a soft breath, her eyes lowering for just a moment before returning to him. "It is not something I have ever done before," she admitted. Lily looked between them again, sensing something bigger but choosing not to interrupt it. Instead she reached for Scarlett's hand, small and certain. "You can stay again tonight," she said simply. Scarlett looked down at her, then back at Ethan, the question unspoken but present. Ethan did not answer it for her, he simply said, "You already know what you want." And that was enough. The room fell into a quiet that was not empty, not uncertain, but full, like something had settled into place without needing to be explained. And for the first time, the silence was not something that followed a reveal, it was something that held a beginning. In this deeply emotional journey, a struggling single dad offers kindness without questions when a mysterious woman appears at his door, unaware she is a powerful female CEO escaping a world of pressure and control. As their lives briefly intertwine, quiet dignity, warmth, and human connection unfold in ways that redefine what truly matters, making this one of the most touching stories about grace, second chances, and unexpected bonds. Through simple moments with his daughter and a home filled with honesty, the single dad reveals a strength that no wealth can replicate, while the female CEO begins to rediscover a life beyond expectations, turning this into one of those rare touching stories that linger in the heart. As the outside world searches for her, the contrast between power and peace becomes undeniable, shaping another of the most memorable touching stories of emotional redemption. This narrative stands among the finest touching stories that highlight kindness over status, and ultimately becomes one of those unforgettable touching stories where silence speaks louder than power. If this story stayed with you, you're not alone. Subscribe. There's more waiting to be told.